Good afternoon, and welcome to a special edition here of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I am your host today, Aaron Quinn, and we're here with a quick hits with AQ this morning. I don't do this often, but it's a wildcard weekend, and we're here with none other than my favorite person to talk defense with. If you've been on watching this show for a while, you know Cody Alexander of MatchQuarters. Cody, welcome. Thank you for your time this morning, man.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, dude. This is I hit you up early in the week. So for the show tonight, Greg and I are gonna do our preview show. That's gonna be a fun one where we jump into both sides of the ball. But I unfortunately drew the short straw here, I think, this weekend and got the matchup of Jaguars defense versus this Bills offense. And it just so happened that you put out a nice long form piece breaking down this defense, which really helped my workload a lot here this week getting ready, because essentially what I would do is dive in and I don't trust anybody more than to just go to take a look at your notes, and sort of confirmed where I was at in my process on a lot of the stuff here. But I messaged you, Cody, watching this defense. I think you and I have talked about this before. Like, I wouldn't make a great defensive coordinator, but if I had the chance, it would look a lot like this, where you're mashing up some different types of concepts that I think are both successful in their own silos in the league. And you're just pulling those levers at the right time between those different concepts. So to kind of just talk about this philosophy that Jacksonville has brought to the NFL, and is this modernizing NFL defenses?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the reason why I really waited all year to talk about the Jaguars, because I just wanted to see what this would look like. So I'm paying attention in the early, like the first quarter of the season. I'm seeing the Fangio coverage rotations. I'm seeing the wide nine from Halfley and Saleh. I'm seeing kind of the mix up of the front structures that we've seen, just kind of that everybody's kind of doing now in the NFL. I'm seeing the all up pressure from Flores. And so I'm like, okay, where's this going to go? Is it sustainable? Is this something that's going to build into a top defense? And what he's done, Anthony Campanile has done, is really, it's the best amalgamation of every top scheme in the NFL. And he just threw it in. The only person he didn't work for is like Mike McDonald or Jesse Minter. Like, that's the only, like, so he doesn't have the Ravens 2.0 stuff. But like everything else, from the Fangio adjacent coverage stuff, the simple front structures of Robert Saleh and Jeff Halfley, to kind of the Brian Flores punch you in the mouth. I think too, people probably need to understand, like, this is a Jersey guy. He went to Rutgers. He played for Greg Schiano, knows Greg Schiano. Then he also worked for Don Brown. So like collegiately, this is somebody that worked for two absolute technicians about fundamentals, which is not surprising when you watch the Jaguars. It's like a completely night and day from what they were last year to this year. The personnel has not really changed that much. Now, they've added some pieces in the secondary, which they needed to, but that safety room is still relatively the exact same. And so what they're doing is just playing fundamentally sound football. I think that's the biggest thing, but he's been able to pull from these parts. This is to me, and why I'm so impressed with this, is everybody talks about doing this. Nobody actually does it, and Anthony Campanile did it.
Yeah, you talk about the fundamentals, and to me, when I look at the Bills defense, I think there's a misnomer out there a little bit about the Bills defense, that it's past its prime in terms of what the NFL. I think it's tough this year because Ed Oliver is out. Michael Hoyt, who you and I talked about this preseason, was going to be kind of a new weapon and a new identity. This defense is out, so they have had to defer back to what they want. But what you talked about, the data is good in terms of like the defensive line. But then when you get beyond it, the fundamentals break down. You see missed tackles and you see plays go for explosive. And that's really been that Achilles heel for the Bills. And when you turn on the Jaguars tape, even plays, like, they aren't the best interior defensive players. They do use a lot of stunts in games and blitzes to offset some of their inefficiencies in stopping the run on early downs, which has led to success. But the reason, to your point, that kind of style of play leads to success is because you are fundamental on the other end. If you're missing tackles and playing as aggressive as they do on some of these early downs, you lead to some of the stuff that we saw when the Bills are playing at their worst on defense. That's sort of the end result that you see, where you haven't really seen that from the Jacksonville Jaguars this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's most impressive, is like, because when you look at him, you're like, okay, well, he's got Flores, and you just said Flores and Don Brown. Like, Don Brown, a famous quote is always like, solve your problems with aggression, right? Flores has basically been running the face melter 5,000 defense for the last 3 years up in the Vikings, right? Like, they lead the league. It's insane. 50% in almost every down and distance this year. It doesn't even matter. So like, you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to see a lot of pressures. And just really don't. It's not. This is a 30%. They are higher. They're at 30% pressure, a blitz team. So their blitz rate is that. They don't necessarily have like a high pressure rate. So it's not like, the other Josh Hines Allen isn't going off with like 20 sacks. So it's not that. Their linebackers their linebackers are true linebackers. So it's not like a Frankie Louvu with the Commanders who went off and had like a 15 sack season. Like that's not really what they're trying to do. And so when you watch this team, everything fits together. This is a zone heavy defense. They're movement based up front. Like you said, they're top 10 in stunt rate. It's still below 20%. They really line up and play. The structures are there. They're doing the things that they're needing to do. They're stopping the run, creating opportunity. It's literally like I'm like I said, if you could create it in a lab and I could just give you like a manual for this is how you run a modern defense. So we're top 5 in stopping the run. We're going to make you throw the ball. You're going to do it in predictable ways. We're going to play zone. We're going to cap verticals. You're going to throw low in the zone. We're going to tackle you. And then you're going to matriculate down the field. You're going to throw a turnover, have a penalty, or we're going to get a sack at some point. And that's literally what they're doing on a week-to-week basis.
I also, though, I want to give a lot more credit to the coaching staff than maybe it sounds like we're giving, because we're talking about the fundamentals, and that tends to be, yes, that is coaching, but that's players buying in, right, and doing their job on the field. Coaches can only coach that so far. But what I saw, and honestly what I saw a lot from your article, is also this isn't the best talent defense in the NFL. I think it's comparable to some of the other teams that exist out there, but they're bought into the scheme, and the scheme, I think, makes up for some inefficiencies. I don't think that safety room is the best safety room in football. I think that there's some vulnerabilities there. I think there's some vulnerabilities in the middle of that defense through the spine entirely, but that scheme allows that split second decision that even elite quarterbacks are having to make, which is all we talk about it on our show, Cody. This game still boils down to your quarterback's EPA and your defense's ability to disrupt that quarterback's or success rate, whichever you want to call it, but you got to disrupt that quarterback from having a successful day. And in the NFL, that's buying a second. That's showing a coverage and showing something else. That's throwing some games. That's bringing pressure at the right times. And Campanelli's credit, pulling those levers at the right time. We see a lot of defensive coordinators that are good coordinators not pulling on those levers at the right time in the right moments. And he's been able to confuse quite a bit of people. And I think that makes up for maybe some of the lack of personnel is scheme based.
Yeah, and really, where they're really interesting, there's four teams that are forcing quarterbacks to throw the ball early, and then also creating, basically a low EPA turnout, and that's the Cleveland Browns, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Houston Texans, along with the Vikings. And so that 4 unit is clustered together. They're forcing the ball out really. Most quarterbacks are throwing the ball at below 2.75 seconds. That's really, really quick. Yeah. And then when they are throwing the ball out, they're tackling them. And so that's kind of where they've gotten. It's not even necessarily that they're really good with pressures. It's not that they are one of the higher sack rate teams. In fact, if PFF does a thing called pass rush performance, they're actually 26th. In pass rush performance. Yep. They're at a, kind of a pedestrian 27% below the NFL average pressure rate. Their sack rate is only 4.8. So it's not even that they're getting pressure. It's the way that they're doing it. Quarterbacks think that they run a lot of zone coverage. Quarterbacks think they're able to get the ball out quickly. When they do, it's still for negative yards. And I think that's where the coverage rotations come into play, that you don't know what they're going to run behind any kind of front structure. They run all the zones. They're good at all the coverages. And so to your point with the coaching, that to me, it's coaching, because like you said, this defense was abysmal last year. It was bottom. I mean, this defense was bad. I mean, now it was almost on the same level as like the Dallas Cowboys this year, where it just was like you could run on it, you could throw on it. It didn't really matter. They were trying to play man coverage on almost every down. They've completely flipped the script. He's running the modern playbook on how to defend the modern offense, and it's really worked for them.
Yeah. And that sort of goes into that second point that I wanted to create is like, you do look at some of these statistics and they don't jump off the charts, but this team really, and this is something Sean McDermott talks a lot about, plays complementary in the style that their offense is built on explosives, right? Like they want to generate some explosives, but the defense is also built on havoc. So like they'll, similar to the Bills, they'll let you like dink and dunk. And if you can remain efficient, you can move up and down the field on this defense, but they're banking on the fact that you're not going to be able to do that 5-6 times a game, and our offense is going to get 3 or 4 of those explosive drives where we get points. And so that type of idea, how does that help to create, like I have this conversation all the time with the Bills and this type of zone. Everyone gets mad that it's a soft zone or whatever they want to call it. But why does that lead to teams like the Bills in the past and the Jaguars this year just having such a high turnover rate when you can just keep everything in front of you and force a team into a 12-play drive?
Well, you're not necessarily hitting home on these pass rushes. So it's not like you're getting the fumbles. It's not like you're getting these kind of errant throws that are just kind of ducked in. What you're doing is you're getting a lot of tip throws at the line because that mush rush is right there. You're getting a lot of kind of eyes on the ball. The biggest thing with zone defenses is like, I think the kind of a misnomer for a lot of fans is if you play a lot of man coverage, you should have a lot of picks, right? Because you're right next to the receiver. You should be able to get the ball. That's actually not. You're going to get penalties and you're going to get pass breakups. You're not going to get these interceptions. So what you're getting with them really is eyes on the ball, and you're either getting tackled the moment that you catch the ball, or I'm tipping it up and another guy's coming in because I'm getting all of that attraction to wherever that ball is. So that's where that vision zone, playing zone, but they're playing enough match heavy zone stuff. Like match is basically just saying, zone with man principles. So they're playing a nice little hybrid mix, which is what a lot of these NFL teams are doing nowadays, to where you're just getting bodies around the ball. And so it's and two, the other thing with that is like turnovers are very volatile. But when you see a defense like you're talking about, where they're not really like the sexy stats just aren't there. They don't get a lot of sacks. They don't have a lot of pressure. They don't blitz a lot. They're not just manufacturing a lot of this, but they do it. To me, what that is that they're technically sound. They're running to the football. They're using vision to then find the ball, and they're getting the guy down when he catches it. And so that to me is the biggest thing. And then when you go into the run game with that, they're stunting to manufacture, tackles for loss, much like the Buffalo Bills have really tried to do in the back, like kind of the back quarter of this year. So they're doing that. Then those linebackers are right there. They're aggressive to the front. So I think if there's one weakness here, it isn't the play action. It isn't kind of that intermediate zone of getting those linebackers to bite up. But that kind of feeds into what they're trying to do. And then they use those kind of coverage rotations to kind of create backstops for what you're trying to do in your play action game.
Yeah. So let's flip that to this again. I got to do this show tonight, and every week I try to figure out, okay, I got this side of the ball. Now let me put a different hat on and look at it from how to attack it. Right. Because I need to know about this Bills matchup. And Josh Allen has actually had a decent amount of success in the past against Fangio style defenses. He's also individually had a decent amount of success against Flores style defenses. I don't know how much success he's had against like a mashup where somebody's pulling those right levers at the right time. Because I do think there's a lot about this style of defense, especially the way Josh Allen's played this year. Specifically, I'm not totally sure in the film what's going on with protections. There's been a lot of free rushers. He's been slow to see some stuff, even though the offense and the numbers are all efficient. Josh just seems a touch slow processing things this year. And I think that a defense like this could make that process a little bit slower. But how do the Bills and what they have offensively attack this defense and try to make that a matchup that favors them in this kind of iron versus iron matchup here?
I think you kind of flipped the script. Everybody's talking about running the ball. Can the Jaguars stop the Buffalo Bills run game? Can they do that? Well, this is a top 5 run defense. Okay. Mm-hmm. We know that the Bills want to run the ball. They want to control the clock. They want game control. They really want to make it as easy, like you mentioned, want to make it as easy as possible for Josh Allen. I think you kind of flip the script on early downs. You attack the ball. You attack by throwing the ball, but you do it through play action passes.
I was going to say play action under center, right?
Yes. And so to me, that's where if you actually look at this is a defense that is, if you just play straight up to them, they're in the negative in EPA. If you go play action, they shift over to the positive. So now they're showing that what they're showing you is that offenses are having success with play action. So I think that to me, especially when you're coming out, like you just got the ball early in the drive, play action, you're in the middle of the field around that logo. Now it's a 4-down game. That's when you need to use those early downs. Because if you throw an incomplete pass on first down and you're on the 45 to the 50, you got 3 more downs after that. So
or just run into the teeth of the defense.
Yes,
slam your head against the wall.
Right. Don't do that. Like, don't be like, well, we have to establish the run, so we're going to run the ball. James Cook's going to get his 100 yards. Like, if we do that, if that's what's going to happen, I think that you get into some trouble with the Jaguars, because that's exactly what they want you to do. They want you to get into predictable passing sets so that they can then kind of do their coverage rotations. They can get after you with their wide 9-4 down front and kind of move some of these guys around, these pieces that they have. So I think play action early in the down and actually kind of at a higher volume. Try and throw as much as you can on first down.
Yeah. What do you think about, I agree with a lot of that, especially on the first down. I do think there's opportunities to get the run established. Like if you get into second and short, third and short yards, I think that James Cook can establish some run plays. I think you can get physical with this team. But another area I kind of see when I look at tape is the Bills receiving core isn't great, but what they are good is they have good size and they are good blockers. And you get a guy like Khalil Shakir out in space. And I know fans have been frustrated with those bubble screens and that predictability of Joe Brady, but it does talk about what that does to a defense that wants you to kind of play in and run into the face of it. What does that kind of stretching them out with big wide receivers and a guy like Khalil Shakir do to open up the middle?
Well, that was you said it. That was actually my second point. So like the next thing you need to do is quick throws to the perimeter into the zone, especially into these open areas. You're going to have open areas in zone. So identify there's kind of like universal areas where you have if they're going to play a lot of quarters or even in cover 2, we just got to put your big receivers on the corners, make sure we block them up, have that inside screen that we can get to the perimeter, get them going, have some sort of funnel on the short side to where we can attack these openings in the zone. That's really where you want to attack them. So when they do blitz, it's understanding what the blitz pattern is and then kind of knowing whether it's going to be some sort of, because they're a big 5-man pressure team, whether it's going to be a fire zone. So where are the seams? Where's that middle part of the area, that underneath area? Are they soft outside, being able to hit that? Are they going to run some sort of a palms pressure where it's a 5-man pressure with quarters behind it, which they love to do? You can find areas with that, especially if you're tacking weak in the weak side. Because they do like to run a lot of like quarter, half modified out of that. So being able to kind of find that area. And I think Josh can do that. I think we all know that he can. So like to your point, it's like, we need to make sure we're not just, running into loaded boxes on early down, get them actually off of their game by throwing a lot or on early downs, but being smart about it. Then when we know that we're going to get some of these pressures on these downs, is it, use some of these perimeter screens. And to your question of what does that mean for like a zone defense? Look, these 4, 5, 6 yard runs, those add up over time. But we know that that's actually going into the string. But when you start putting it in the perimeter, a 5-yard pass can turn into a 50-yard touchdown if somebody doesn't run the right coverage or isn't in the right spot and misses a tackle. And I think to your point, it's like Shakir's awesome at being able to kind of that yak, right? Yards after catch, going and finding that. I think to me, that's really where, when you look at it, if there is a pathway to success, it's really being able to establish that run, passing on early downs to kind of get them to lighten up
the seam on a play action.
Right. And then on top of that, when they go man coverage, go for the home run ball. That's really where teams have had success for the Jaguars, is when you can get them in a situation like a third and a medium, and I know we're going to get man coverage, that's when I want to then execute the deep ball. I don't want to sit there and be, like a Jordan Love's a great example of this. Teams will just play him in shell coverage, right? They'll just get deep and he'll get frustrated because he's got that big arm and he'll just throw picks and it just makes you mad. Don't do that. Right? Don't do that. Take what you get. And then when they get in man, that's when you want to take your shots, or take your shots over the middle and play action, like we've seen Ben Johnson do with the Lions and he's now doing with the Bears. That's where you want to kind of feed into against a team like the Jaguars.
One last question before I get you out of here on this kind of topic. We don't know where Josh Allen's foot's at, right? It was hurt going in. He didn't look great in the last couple of times we saw him. Obviously, he just needed down to keep his streak going live last week. He's had a little bit of rest here. That foot's kind of something that's just lingering in the back of my mind. If it's good enough to Josh Allen being mobile and able to extend plays, what does that offer the Bills in terms of, because we know that QBs want to get the ball out quick, but what happens when teams are able to extend some plays on this defense and get some of those broken plays?
Well, especially with zone, you're not attached to a man. So you get guys kind of working into different spots, and then it's like it turns into scramble drill. And if you don't suction cup to your receiver, that's when receivers can get open. I also think too, like with the biggest thing with Josh in the playoffs is his running ability. Is like, hey, we need 3 yards right here. I know that we're just going to put it in you. We're just going to run quarterback power right here, and you're going to get it right. Or hey, they're running a lot of zone. They're getting it. I'm just gonna go ahead and take the scramble. And I think what that does with teams is now that those linebackers and those intermediate defenders are now more worried about the quarterback taking off, because it's just a drive killer. I mean, we've seen Mahomes do it a million times.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, we got him. And then he scrambles for 10 yards and it's now first down. I mean, there's probably no better quarterback on 3rd and 15 than Patrick Mahomes, right? And
annoyingly,
a lot of that, that's why. And I think Allen has that ability as well. And so he's one of those that you would throw into that list of guys that it's like, yeah, look, this is a team that doesn't get a lot of sacks. This is a team that doesn't get a lot of pressures. He's going to be able to scramble. And so because of zone eyes and because they have 2 super athletic linebackers, I think 2 of the more underrated super athletic, they'll be able to catch him. But it's like, will they catch him enough like before he gets to a first down? And then the more that you do that, now that brings them closer and closer and closer to the box. Now they're having to, hey, I really want you to play more of a spy than necessarily get to your drop. Well, what does that do? That creates space in between the linebacker and the safety, the linebacker and the corner. And where do you have a quarterback that can fit it in there? And so I think that to me is the recipe. And I think that's kind of the kind of the cherry on top for how can the Bills win this game offensively. It's Josh Allen has to be Josh Allen. Go out there, extend the plays, do that. Now, I do agree with you. If he's going to be a statue and he's not able to extend plays and it turns into a pocket passing game, I think we all agree that's probably not something that you want to do, especially against a defense like this.
Yeah, I love it, man. And honestly, I think you just confirmed my prediction for tonight. So spoiler for anyone watching tonight, I feel better now after talking here with you, Cody. Perfect, man. Well, I appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy guy this time of year. I did mention that article about MatchQuarters. If you want to press anything that you've done or are doing that you want to let Bills fans know where and how to find, the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, so if I mentioned earlier about the cornerback pressures and things like that, I wrote an article. So if you just go into MatchQuarters.com, type in Bills, there's a bunch of articles. I've done some recent ones, especially on Benford. The pressure, I think, against the Bengals was where we're seeing this defense going. If you're not a subscriber, that's fine. I give you 1 free article. So if you're just like, look, I just want to know what the Jaguars are doing, just go become a sub, but just a free sub at matchquarters.com, and then you can read the article. So yeah, if you're interested in this, all this is there. If you just are like a big defensive nerd like I am, this is the hub for you. I'm talking NFL defense and really have been for the last 10 years. So this is what I do. I love it. And I'm a nerd and I love having these kind of conversations on a weekly basis.
Yeah, man, I appreciate your work. And also you and Felix are doing a great job with the podcast. I try to check that out as much as I can. And obviously a big fan of MatchQuarters and all the data dumps and all the work that you do to highlight the defensive side of the ball. Appreciate you so much again for coming on. Make sure if you're here, you are coming on the Cover One Buffalo post game tonight, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Greg and I will be here breaking down the entire game. Now that I'm loaded up with some good information from Cody, but glad you guys were here to join us. I hope you have a great rest of your day and go Bills.